Hey everybody, Melanie here. I am excited to talk about this today because I have a lot of thoughts, and that probably started with the videos I've been watching for the past year about the rise and fall of YA dystopia, why these dystopians worked, what made them kind of start to fall apart, and the great interest and hold this specific subgenre has in the YA world with teens and adults alike. And I've just been wondering for a while, is Hunger Games really that good? Um, it wasn't the first of its kind in the era. I mean, you can go back all the way back to when the Giver series by Lois Lowry came out. And that sort of started the middle grade dystopia, exploring something Orwellian without being too big for younger children, or I guess like middle school aged kids. And then into the later teens, a lot of people were reading stuff a little bit older than the Giver series. And the Hunger Games seems to be one that kind of has stuck with us. I've been so curious as to why that is. And I couldn't really discuss it until I went back and read the series. Over the past couple of months, I have read all 3 books. I've been taking notes, I've been thinking and discussing. My sister loves the Hunger Games, and we've had a lot of good talks about it, about Katniss, about why this story feels special, whereas others may not quite hit the mark for us. And there's just something about it that has always worked pretty dang well. I want to start off this video purely subjective, just some things I like about the Hunger Games series, things that I forgot, that are a little different, that just work really well for me. First of all, I love Katniss. I love all the characters. I think the characters are so well written and digestible and quirky, and there's just something about Suzanne Collins' writing of people that makes you appreciate a wide variety of characters. On top of that, Katniss's perspective helps you see people in a way where she's honestly, unless you're an actual threat to the people she cares about, she doesn't have much distaste for people, even if she recognizes that the Capitol's messed up. Her team, people who help her in the Capitol, like, she can't help but feel like they are also kind of not the same type of victim, of course, but blind to the realities of the world. And a lot of them are as well-intentioned as they can be. Along with that, Katniss is so selfless, she's so strong and capable, resourceful, and all of her perspective, it was hard to translate into the movie, but I still think they did as good a job as they could. All of her perspective is so interesting. Some of my favorite parts that kind of inspire my own writing and my own, just the feel of what I want there to be in my books, is when she's in a forest. Even in the first book, when she's out in those trees, I think of some of the tracks on the film score, and I'm like, oh, those are beautiful. And they work so well with her character. Her view of the world is so interesting. Obviously not always beautiful, but when she's out there in her element, in nature, it's just fantastic to read. When it comes to some character changes, I picture Peeta a little differently in my mind in the books than I do in the movie. That being said, when I was younger, Josh Hutcherson was like my celebrity crush. I loved him in Bridge to Terabithia. I just thought he was so cute, and I wasn't mad when he was cast as Peeta, and I think he nailed that tenderness and that charm that Peeta has. But something about Peeta in the books that I really loved on this reread is that Peeta's so funny. He's like cracking jokes, mostly I feel like to make Katniss comfortable. That's kind of what it feels like it's coming from. He's sarcastic a lot. He's not as, he's still very tender. He still loves her a lot and very soft, I'd say, with a lot of sarcasm that you don't really get the same taste of in the books. So when you transition from him in book 2 to him in book 3, it's even more devastating because he's been through a lot. There are a lot of moments that are really powerful. Something I love is that everyone wants to take care of Katniss. Like, the people in her life want to take care of her. And she wants to take care of other people, but like, I think starting with Peeta, because she's had to take care of her sister and her like grief-ridden, depressed mother for so long, she is starting to be taken care of by Peeta. Getting into a little bit more objectivity, things I've discussed with other people, observations I've made, I want to start off with the number one thing that I've noticed people comment on when they discuss the Hunger Games, and that is that a lot of people think that Katniss is flat, is boring, and that her whole personality is just grief and trauma. Starting off the bat, I would say Katniss has a lot to her. She's just kind of a quiet person. You know, she's subtle. She's not overwhelming. When she's in her element, it is really nice to hear her thoughts. You experience the awkwardness of romance and relationships. Her inability to be like friendly and personable. She's not intensely likable like Peeta is, and that's okay. That is part of something she has to overcome. It hurts her when Peeta is not there to help speak for her, and she has to learn to do that for herself. She's incredibly selfless, and I think that's the first thing, the thing about her that always sticks, that like she can't ever bring herself to be completely selfish. Like there's only one time where I question, would Katniss actually do that? Because she is so kind, and people would say maybe it's a weakness, and in these cases in the Hunger Games, definitely, yeah, you have to be a little bit more harsh, but she is protective. She is the kind of maternal that like frightens me. Like, I wouldn't mess with her people, you know? She's so resourceful too. I think something that a lot of YA dystopia does poorly, or that people make fun of, it's not always bad and it's not always incorrect, but a lot of it is like I saw a comic that said, like, was making fun of how, like, the main character in a YA sci-fi story has, like, the ability to fight in all manner of ways, like is so skilled in combat for no apparent reason. I think that's a thing in stories that, like, in general can frustrate people. And not even that, but, like, that someone could be trained into something, and as long as they're trained, they're good at it. And it just takes a few, like a training montage to, like, get that taken care of. For Katniss, it's her whole life. And even when she's thrown into it, and she does, they allow the tributes to practice before they enter the arena, she has skills and she is efficient. She, though, even recognizes that just because she can hunt doesn't mean she wants to hunt people, and that it's the same thing, even though Gale sees it as the same thing. For her, it's very different. It's a very different experience, but she is capable. She's resourceful. She can climb the trees, not for no reason. It's not like she suddenly tried it. She never tried it. She climbs up the tree and she's safe. There weren't really moments where she had never done anything before and suddenly she was okay. Like, even when they come up in the second book into the arena, and she's lucky she's learned how to swim, but, like, people, like, Peeta hadn't really, like, not everyone knew how, because not everyone could practice. It's not like they had a community pool and swim lessons. If you didn't go to the pond or the lake, you weren't learning how to swim. So there's never really a time I felt like she was, like, capable of doing something insane for no reason, you know? I also found that she is a reliable friend. Something that doesn't happen in the movies that I really like in the books is she befriends Madge, the mayor's daughter. And Madge is the one who gives her the Mockingjay pin. And Madge is very different from Katniss, but they don't judge each other. I think Suzanne Collins, like, is pretty good at giving you men and women who, like, either suck or are awesome. Like, she can write both sides of that coin in a way that, like, give you people like Madge and like Gale. It makes sense that Katniss would befriend someone like Gale, and that someone might see her as like one of the boys, but she doesn't do that because she's just trying to feel safe. And Madge is a safe person, which is why it's devastating when her family dies, and we don't get that in the movies, and I wish we did, because I loved that little piece of Katniss that was just normal and had a female friend, and they hung out and she listened to Madge play the piano. It was, like, really sweet and really safe for her, and I wanted her to have that. We want to see, and it's, like, really valuable to see her have those friendships. And it's even more apparent when they're trying to decide who their allies are going to be in the second games that they're in. And she chooses all the outcasts because I think she feels like an outcast, and she trusts them because they may be weak because they won't give up who they are, but she doesn't feel they're as likely to turn on her. She has a sweet naivety that I was talking about with my sister, that she doesn't realize she's beautiful, which is another trope of, like, she stands in the mirror and she talks how plain she is, and then, like, a multitude of men are suddenly in love with her, and they're pretty hot too, and it's like, what? How is that a thing, you know? And sometimes I do think it's totally fair that you just don't see how beautiful you are. So I can totally see that. But then with Katniss, she doesn't need, there's no need for her character, no sense for her character to be concerned about her physical appearance, because it doesn't have to do with survival and taking care of her family. That's not something that she feels is necessary. Her mom kind of does, because her mom was raised in a wealthier setting and is more aware of what your physical appearance can do, the effect it can have on the people around you and stuff like that. It makes perfect sense to me that Katniss wouldn't see that. And into the more, like, the most important part of this for me, people complaining about her trauma being her personality. Trauma, the reason it's a problem is it gets in the way of your life. It is debilitating. It alters your view of the world, and it makes you feel unsafe, and it can just greatly affect your day-to-day. So of course her life is going to be full of trauma. That's going to be the priority. She's surrounded by the things that trigger her for a dang good reason. Like, I can understand the critique because you want her to have things she likes, but she does. There's a lot of things she likes and loves, but I think she's a simple person. I don't think she wants the flashy life. I don't think she has this big personality. And that's why reading the books, I think, does more justice to her character than the movies, despite the great performance by Jennifer Lawrence and the writing that they did. I think her inner thoughts help so much with that. And I think it was the right thing and the more realistic thing to write that her trauma affects her so much, that she's on guard, that she's in survival mode. She's dealing with grief from loss of her father, and that doesn't really stop ever in her life. That doesn't just go away, you just get better at dealing with it. And until she can be safe and rest, she can't really work on that healing. Peeta, this is why she's drawn to people like Peeta and Madge. They're safe, Even Prim, though Prim terrifies her because loss terrifies her, and she almost lost Prim to the Hunger Games and then does lose her at the end of Mockingjay. And it's just like, of course trauma would be an overwhelming part of her, but unless you read the books, you don't understand. This is like, she's still a whole person. She still has interests and cares about things. She just has like a simple view of the world and hasn't even had much time to figure out what she super cares about. And you get a lot of who she is and what she is based on how people treat her and talk to her. And if you listen to that, you listen to Peeta talk about her voice and how beautifully she sings, kind of like her dad, then like, you get that she's a person with skills and talents and interests that aren't just survival, but survival has to be the first thing or she loses everything. And that's just her life. I find that stories that don't address trauma really just grind my gears, because you lose a parent and you cry and it's normal, but then you're in go mode. And this is why I like authors like Brandon Sanderson, and why I love the book, The Sword of Kaigan. If you don't know this already, I talk about it sometimes in my videos, and it was like my favorite read of last year. It wrecked me emotionally, and it dealt with grief, trauma, what grief is after the war ends. Like, stuff happens and you have so much of the book to deal with it. It's insane. And even though Suzanne Collins gives like a small epilogue talking about how it took Katniss a while to even decide to have kids and to trust that they would be okay, she could do that and handle her life with children. Peeta is very patient with her, bless his heart. That was real. It took her 15 years from starting to like officially settle down, be with Peeta, to like have the point of having children. And that's not normal. But even other than the epilogue, throughout the whole story, yeah, she's reflecting what she's dealing with constantly, because trauma isn't just something that you cry about and move on. When there are deaths of loved ones in a story and characters just kind of deal with it, that's not realistic, and it's at the point to lending itself to being called bad writing, because there are other stories that do a better job. I think as an author, you owe your character some of that reality, that moment to grieve, and you owe it to your writers to be honest about what it is, about that experience and how it's painful and really heavy and weighs on you, and what that does, because then I think you can also show how you like climb out of that. Nothing's the same. Everything changed in the end for Katniss, but even in her circumstances, she found some peace, and she still fights the nightmares, but she has people she can trust. And that's why I think it's important to lean on people who can be a safe space for you. And that's why that's one major reason, and I think an objective reason, why this story is a little bit more solid, why it stands the test of time a little bit. Because Katniss feels real to me and important. And she's not just the main female character who's boss and can do anything. She has to do anything to survive, and pushes her to limits that she didn't expect. And yeah, you see how it affects her, and I think that's really important. Along with Katniss, the characters in general are so well done. At the end of the series in Mockingjay, when it doesn't show it in the film, but her mom and sister had a book of like plants that they drew and detailed with, I think with Peeta's help, because he's a good artist, to show the uses of plants, the dangers of them, how to recognize them. He kept it in the little book, and she does the same thing in a way with people. Literally does this in Mockingjay. It's part of her ending where her little found family with Peeta and Haymitch put this book together of people and their lives that are important, detailing the memory of them and the experiences with them, and then mentions that they add the picture of Annie and Finnick's son, which is devastating and makes me furious, but it's really, it's the thing that Katniss cares about. You don't realize it, but she's a people person. She wants to remember these people because as she feels in the story, like everyone was hurt by this war and these people deserved better. And she wants to remember the people who helped her, especially the people she lost. Another thing that's often targeted is the love triangle, because that concept, it didn't just start with the Hunger Games, but people often turn back to that, and it is made fun of. You see it in Twilight. Are you Team Jacob? Are you Team Edward? Even Team Peeta, Team Gale happened a little bit, where it's Katniss, like, not even sure that romance is safe for her. Speaking of her need for safety, she's terrified of it, because it could mean having children, and it could mean them going to the games, and she doesn't feel, given all the stuff in her life, that she could love like that. Gale loving her makes sense. Peeta loving her, having his crush on her, makes sense, especially when they are in survival mode together. But Katniss is drawn to who makes her feel safe, and at some point, because of the way Gale sees the world, she doesn't feel safe with him, and that's okay. And even in Mockingjay, she overhears Gale and a very beat down, previously tortured Peeta discussing that in the end Katniss will have to choose one of them. And even in her mind, she's like, but why? Like, that's not... I'm trying to kill President Snow and then drop off the face of the earth. I don't have time to think about that. Why are we thinking about that? So even Katniss questions it. Her naivety still is there because she doesn't recognize maybe why they love her so much. And it doesn't feel dramatic for the sake of drama. Along with the love triangle, I feel like the Hunger Games functions outside of a gimmick, where a lot of dystopian type worlds failed to me is where they turned to the big idea to carry the story. And I think the Hunger Games are the hook. Like, I distinctly remember in 5th grade, a girl did a book report on the Hunger Games. It's the first time I'd ever heard of it. The way she explained it was like, kids are thrown into an arena and they fight to the death. And I went, that sounds awful, but I'm not gonna say I wasn't interested. And then when I read it in middle school, I was hooked by that big idea, but that is not what carries it. And big idea is functional. I think a lot of people think of being like sorted into something based on your personality, but in the Hunger Games, you're not factioned off based on your personality. You don't get to choose and separate from your family. There's a reason for these things, and it's not just like for the big idea. Because if that's all you have starting off, think again. Like, it feels like Katniss came from a very real place and is a very real person thrown into a extreme but reflective world of a reality in the world, of how we put children through it because our society isn't functional, and how devastating war is. And it's like we're going through war, we're dealing with the effects of that. Leaning into that, the themes in this story are pretty solid in my mind. There comes a point, speaking of war, where Katniss says that no one in the end benefits from war. Neither side, even the winning side, even the side with all the power and the pleasure. Like, you see the capital citizens and everyone is devastated by the war. And the books are a lot more graphic too. In the end of Mockingjay, no kids are safe when this world is so violent and messed up. No one is safe because they're either in danger of losing who they are, as Peeta was always worried about, or they're in danger of just losing their lives and their people and their peace and happiness and overall security. War hurts everybody. Children are greatly hurt and destroyed by war. That they grow up too soon. This is why Prim's story, she is safe when she's a child, when Katniss can protect her, but the inevitability of her growing up and being, you know, someone who helps other people, being an adult too young, kills her. That's what kills her. And in the end, this isn't a bunch of teenagers fighting together to save the world from one evil person, or even just a poor government system. This is a teenager dealing with her actions of survival and how it challenged and affected the system. That fighting to survive, the bare desire to survive and protect her loved ones, challenged this leader, goes to show how ineffective this system was, how dangerous and horrible and evil this place was. But that she knew in that moment, when she could take out Snow, that it wouldn't end with him, so she takes out Coin. Love that scene. Love that awareness that she had. That's realistic. There will always be someone else. There's someone just as bad behind the big bad guy, prepared to take the throne, you know? And that's, in this case, Alma Coin. She is cold and calculating and selfish and power hungry in a similar fashion as Snow. But she is more wasteful than him, and that is what tips Katniss off in the end. And of course, it seems like things work out for the better, and that is also very much a possibility, but it comes at great expense and a great loss, and you have to be smarter than the other people. She outsmarted Coin. She let Coin think she was just some girl for show to kill President Snow, who was dying anyway. But Katniss was more than that. That shows that she's more than some teenager with a bunch of luck. She's got, you know, she's got a brain. And that scene kind of nails for me that Katniss is aware. She knows the cost of what she's done, and she's willing to do that because Coin killed Prim, and Coin should not have felt so safe after she did that. And even though I've enjoyed other YA dystopian stories, and not all of them have been bad or ineffective, other people like them a lot. Some people don't like The Hunger Games, but for me, this is a solid story. To kind of recap, I find Katniss to be an effective, realistic, resourceful heroine. Life doesn't just happen to her, but when it does, how she responds and reacts is so important. She's selfless, even though she's not always nice. She's a good person, and she is driven by her love for her sister Prim. I think being given such a solid motivation from the beginning is kind of what defined her. And if you do that, if you give your character good motivation, it doesn't really matter the gimmick that they're thrown into, because the character is compelling enough to follow. Some concepts, some big ideas that are like the what ifs of this dystopian world don't work for me, because the characters don't work for me, because I don't care, because they don't really care, you know? Others kind of fall off where the films don't do as well as The Hunger Games did, I think is due to the heart of it. The heart of Katniss, and how special she is to people, and how special her story is. And the people that surround her become as special to us as they are to her. These are just some reasons that I think The Hunger Games stand the test of time. It's helping me in my writing to think, what does my character care about? Am I too focused on the big thing that's happening to recognize that there's a person here going through an experience? So if you're wondering, Are these books still as good as I remember them being? I think they are. I've grown to appreciate them 10 times more, and I highly recommend you return to them or try them for your first time. Please comment, subscribe, like, let me know what you think about this slight analysis and discussion, and I'll try to respond to your comments because I love The Hunger Games. Special place in my heart. I think an effective story and will stand the test of time as far as YA dystopian goes. Please let me know your thoughts, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.